We are working in Module 11 and we're talking about charts in this module. We've already talked about how to create some charts. We've already looked at different types of charts you can create over in Section 2. And now we're in Section 3 and I want to show you how to take those different chart types that you've put in and edit those. There might be some things that you want that aren't currently on the chart that you chose, or you may want to move those to a different area or delete them totally. There's just a ton of different things you can do. So let's flip over and start editing some of these charts we created. The first thing I want to tell you when it comes to editing charts is that there are a ton of different options. There will be several different ways to get to those options, and I'll show you those different ways, but go ahead and look through them at some point and just see how some of these options can help enhance the chart that you currently have. I'm going to go ahead and click on this pie chart we have here, and the first thing I want to point out is that you have this plus sign that lets you add, remove, or change some of the different elements in your chart. Like if you wanted to get rid of this total here, or if you wanted to do something with the legend, you could. We'll go through those in a second. The little pencil that you see here is what we call chart styles. When we start talking about color schemes and different styles of colors, we'll use that particular option. And then you can also use this filter option if you want to filter out data in your chart. The next place you can go is if you notice at the top you have your Chart Tools Contextual tab, and when you click on it there are two tabs below, the Design tab and the Format tab. Let's start with this Design tab. Probably the easiest thing to do is to start with the chart styles right here. There is a scroll bar. Make sure to scroll so that you can see all of the styles. A style basically means that a group of elements have been put together to create a style. For example, we're using the first one, and you'll notice in our pie chart, we really can't tell what percentage of the pie each of these happens to represent. But if I look at style 2 or 3, you'll notice in 3 that there's actually a percentage on top of each piece of the pie. Notice the legend's also been moved over to the right in that style. When you go across, you might like style 6, for example, or style 7 is very popular. Notice in style 7 that you actually have a darkened background, but you still don't know which piece of the pie is represented other than looking at the colors down here, and you don't know the percentage. So we can actually add those. Those would be elements that we could add with this plus sign. Notice that if you look at style 8, this particular one doesn't have the legend anymore, but it does have to the right of each of these the name of that particular piece of the pie. So you can see this is like a starting point, and then you can add things that you might want. I'll go back and use this style 7 here to start with. And let's go down here and maybe add a few things to this particular chart. I'm going to hit the plus sign, and notice there are 3 things that I can add or take off. So I have my legend down at the bottom, so I really don't need this if I'm going to use the legend. I can take either one of these on or off, and I can go back and add them if I'd like to. So you'll notice by clicking and unclicking that I was able to actually take one of these on or off, and notice I was able to add data labels as they're called. Let's look at the chart styles option here. These are the same ones that I saw up above. So if there happens to be a particular one that I like better, I can just go and click on it from here. Notice there's a color tab that I can click on as well. If I don't like the current color scheme, I might pick one of these other color schemes. The last tab at the bottom is the Filters tab. If I only wanted to see Australia and Canada, I could uncheck the other 2 and only see those in the pie. I would have to hit apply at the bottom in order to see that. Filter means you're going to give it the criteria you'd like, and then it will hide everything else. I'll go back and turn them all back on and hit apply again, and now you can see that I see all of the different locations. Now let's go ahead and look over at my chart all quarters and see if there's some options we can do with this one. Notice we have our same plus sign over here, but I want you to notice this time that I have several different chart elements I can choose from. Axes, which you do want. Remember, your axes are where you have your y-axes representing the values here, and your x-axis representing your categories here. But I don't have what they call axes titles. Let me turn those on so you can see what those are. You'll notice over here it says axes title, and here it says axes title. What I can do is I can click in there and then type in whatever I'd like this to say. I'll say categories in this case. And let's say that I come over on this one and I get rid of what's in there. And let's say that we actually say dollars this way. You can have those say anything you want. They're just labels for the categories. Back to the plus sign. I can add data labels. If you notice, I haven't clicked yet. I've just pointed the mouse there so I can show you what these are. But data labels appear on each of the column at the very end, so that you can see the actual value of that particular column. You do have the option to move those inside of the bars, but we'll see that a little bit later. A data table would be this. This is the data, and then this is the chart. We call this the data table down here. You might have what they call error bars. You might have grid lines, which we had turned these off earlier. We have our legend turned on, and then we might also add a trend line. If you add a trend line, you can tell Excel which series you'd like the trend line to be on. Each of these locations is a series. All the blue ones are a series, all the orange ones are a series, etc. And those are some of the chart elements you can turn on or off for the charts like this. I'll go ahead and turn off the data table at the bottom. Notice the chart styles up here. This one here is very popular because you can see it a little bit better. You've got a darker background. Some other options that you would have, if you look all the way over to the left, you have Add Chart Element. We were able over here to check and uncheck chart elements, but here we can take it a little bit further. For each of these, you're going to have some additional options. With axes, I'm showing the primary horizontal. I can also show the primary vertical if I'd like. Axes titles. Notice that I can show them horizontally or vertically. Then I have my chart title, and that's this title right up here. It's on top of the chart right now, but I might choose what they call center overlay, which means that it's on top of the actual chart itself. Or I might turn it off. I might not want it at all. We did talk about the data labels, and I mentioned that they don't have to be at the top of the column. It can be inside of the column. You can see that I can choose center. Inside end means it's inside the column but towards the top end. Inside base means towards the bottom. Outside end is where we started, and you might have data callouts, which are these. I'll just choose inside base. Going back, we've got our data table that we turned off, but I could turn it back on with the legend keys or with no legend keys. Here we've got what we call error bars, and you can have standard error bars. You can have some that show in a 5% range or what they call standard deviation. Grid lines, I've got my primary major on, but I could have primary vertical ones. And then primary minors, and I can have them vertical or horizontal. The minors would be, instead of having a line just at every 1,000, I can have one, it looks like in this case, at every 200 in there. The last thing is the trend line. We do have one, so we have different ways that we can let the trend line show. We can have exponential if we want. There's just different ones that we can opt to show here. The next thing is the quick layout. There were a lot of things that we could turn on as far as chart elements, but some of these layouts will have some of these things already in the layout. For example, if you look at layout 2, you'll see that this one looks a little bit different because they've separated the bars a little bit, and it also has a chart at the top and the legend at the top. Here's the normal one, layout 3. Let me just go down. I don't want to look at every single one of these. There's so many. But let's look at layout 9, for example, has a legend over on the right. And then we've got layout 11, which also shows you the legend on the right as well. You have different ones you can pick from, so you just pick the ones that you would like. Now under the Format tab up here, you've got a ton of options. One of the things that I just did was I chose an option that made the bars lay on top of each other like this. I can actually select one bar and you'll notice that it selects the whole series. See that? If you want to do something with one bar only, go back and click on that one bar and you will deselect the others in the series. But what I wanted to show you is that if I go ahead and select these bars, I can go up and play with what's called the shape fill. And that's going to be the color or whatever you'd like inside the bars that you've chosen. Why don't we go ahead and stop the video here, and let's go ahead and go over into part 2 and talk a little bit more about some of the other options when you're editing your charts.